9 outlaws with $50,000 in stolen cash, 2 best friends on a divergent path, and the small outpost town of Bitter about to be buried under more than a snowstorm. Today, we're looking at Blackgat's edition of Day of the Outlaw. Originally published in 1955, written by Lee Wells, cover designed by Jeff Borzimmer, cover art by Robert Crowfoot. My favorite line in this book is spoken by the main character Dan, or the prominent main character Dan. I always try to find a cool quote in books I read, and it is the quote that Dan says is, "You back a friend for what he is now, not for what he might have been." I thought that was a cool line. I ended up picking up this version of the book, or this book, actually not version of the book. I ended up picking this book up. I was poking around the Stark House Press website, and I was just trying to see how it worked and if you bought the digital or the physical copies of the books. And so I didn't really know, and it wasn't really explained very well. And because some of them will say like EPUB underneath. And so obviously I could have backed out at any time, but I oopsie bought a book. So bought this, and I took it on vacation but didn't get a chance to read it. I read it after. I really like it. I really enjoyed it. I try to read at least one Western a year. I've been trying to get into more Westerns, and I've only read Louis L'Amour's. So this is the first non-Louis L'Amour Western I've read. And there's something about Westerns that always, like, at least I've read 3, and 2 of them. So I read 3, and hey, there's my mouse. I read 3, and 2 of the 3 have both given off the vibe of like they're great for D&D quests. So I got the big thing the skull jar of dice. There was a Louis L'Amour book that was a great idea for. I'm writing a review on it shortly, but it's great for Dungeons and Dragons quest, and having the tension in this book of the 9 outlaws and the 2 main characters all in this town together, and plus the interpersonal relationships of this small town. I just felt like a really cool idea. Like, it was this weird where you find like inspiration. I was like, man, that'd be a really cool like plot for like a role playing game, a Dungeons and Dragons quest, or whatever. But I digress. So the book starts with Dan Murdoch. He's a foreman for the Star Ranch, owned by his best friend Blaze Starrett, or Starrett. It's Starrett. So I think because they call it the Star Ranch, it's probably Starrett. I might be completely wrong on that. They're traveling to the small outpost town in Colorado, and it's like a regular stop for them in their line of work. And one of the first things I really enjoyed about this book is they're kind of how cowboys were. They're like ranch hands, they were just workers with a gun, and that's how the book starts. These 2 ranch hands on the way, one owner, one foreman, on the way to Bitter. The first tension point in the book between the main character and his friend, who he wants to stay friends with, but technically his boss, is Blaze's after Hale Crane's ranch, the HC ranch. And on the conversations, on their conversation riding to Bitter, you're getting the idea that Blaze is not going to take no for an answer, and he's going to do any means necessary to get this ranch. And it's a little bit different mentality than Dan. Dan's just like, I'm happy, I'm working, I'm farther along in my life than I ever thought I would be, ever he thought he would be. And he's just content. He's like most of us, just, I'm content in my life. I'm not going to go risk my life or possibly murder somebody for a ranch or for, gains. And then the book switches a little bit, not narration, so to speak, but like kind of main character point of view. And then it goes into the 9 outlaws. So that's Jack Braun, Tex Darrow, Pace Udlum, Gene Hyatt, Charlie Voss, Denver Egan, Juarez, Shorty Ratner, and I think that's it. I think Shorty Ratner is the last one. And he's actually injured. So that's why not only it's not a storm initially that what brings everybody to town. It's, Dan and Blaze are going there no matter what. They get there first. But there's an early spring thaw and all the roads are becoming muddy and impassable. So the Outlaws need a place to stop, and they know no one's going to be tracking them during the mud. The horses can't get good footing on the trails, so they end up in Bitter. And that's where everything starts to unravel for this town. These 9 outlaws come in. First thing they do is take over the bar. They get the bone saw, the town doctor, to look after Shorty, and that is the initial start of this book. This book has a lot of tension right from the beginning, which I loved. I like the idea of this town's kind of being suffocated now by these 9 outlaws, or 8. One of them's injured. And just how the outlaws kind of piece by piece slowly take over the small town. Because it's an outpost, not really of a town. There's no real lawman. There's no real law presence. That's kind of where the early cowboy type vibe comes, of just ranchers with guns. So the only real, lawman, so to speak, is Dan Blaze, who's already got criminal intentions of his own, kind of, and some of the townspeople. One of the other subplots in this book, there's a lot of motivation between the characters, plus little things going on. Not only are Dan and Blaze at odds over tactics on getting to HC Ranch, there's also a love interest in town named Paula that Dan fancies, but he's kind of not. He doesn't think he's kind of good enough, and then Blaze kind of puts it in his ear no, you're not good enough. And there's another lady in town that you're more fit for, named Vivian. You have all these plot points and threads to pull on, they're trying to protect the townspeople that they know, plus they have, they fancy the ladies there or whatever. And, there's lots of cool plot points and lots of interpersonal dynamics in this story. It's not just a heist, kind of like a quick heist story. There's history with Dan and Blaze, and now Paula and Vivian are brought in on that. And there's even stuff with their past that kind of gets brought out. I don't want to get too spoilery in the book. Plus, one of the things I really liked about the book is the gang of 9 or 8 that are really interacting with the story, or even less than. A couple of them kind of get jobbed out for little stakeout missions, but there's a lot of them are really active in the gang. And Tex Darrow really has the ambition to take over. He's not liking Jack Braun's leadership. He thinks he should be the next one. So there's a lot of sleep with one eye open kind of vibe. And there's even a wild card in the group of Pace Udlum, who's the young guy, who's just kind of they describe him in the book as kind of just a killer that likes killing. So I really like that. There's also a couple, character, another young outlaw that kind of has misgivings. So there's a lot of push and pull. Lee Wells, the author, writes really, I don't want to say writes really well because that's stupid. Lee Wells' prose are really good. I enjoyed reading this book. He calls the Muddy Trails gumbo a lot, but I think it's very fitting though, because that's kind of what the book felt like. It felt like you were putting the lid on a hot dish and you were steaming it, and it was getting hot with pressure. The cover it's sepia and brown tones, but it actually takes place during an early thaw in spring. Well, a winter storm comes halfway through the book, and I felt like that was a really cool. It's almost like a resetting of everything. Everything's kind of building. The tension is building and building, like a good noir story. And then all of a sudden this storm comes, and now they're even more stranded in this town, and some more characters get revealed in the town, and some more story elements start popping up. And it just felt like you were cooking something, and you put the lid on and started simmering it. And I thought that was really, really cool. So there was just a couple minor criticisms with the book, and it's mainly just the amount of MacGuffins that keep them in the town. They're first drawn there because of the muddy streets, and they can't leave. And then Shorty is the priority to get him well. And then the snowstorm is keeping them there. And then Jack's kind of having almost like, I got like a vibe, like under, in the tone of him, that he was almost kind of done with the life, and it almost like he just didn't feel like kind of leaving in a way, which helps with the tension of Tex, but it felt like there was a lot of things, just like it was this constant reminder of like, well, they can't leave. Well, they're stuck there. They can't leave. And I felt like that was just a little bit like a minor little thing that I was like, okay, another reason why they can't go, or why they're sticking around, or why they haven't made a decision on what's to happen next. And because they never address really what happens with Shorty. I think maybe at the end, he's brought back up, but it seemed like there was a lot of like MacGuffins to keep them there. Another minor criticism that I had is, I really enjoyed the love story in here. That was like a really cool element, especially once that seed is planted in Dan's head of, Paula isn't the girl for you, Vivian is more the girl from you, and he's kind of questioning it, and he's kind of looking at Vivian a little bit differently, and I think she kind of gets the hint, like a little bit, that he's looking at her a little different, and then so things kind of happen in that relationship. But no spoilers. I hope this isn't a spoiler. Like, one of the women sort of make the decision for him in a way, and I felt like Dan was robbed of like a growth experience. You know what I mean? Like he does like all this like cool behind the scenes like sabotage of this gang, and he's like the main battler, or the main gunslinger and stuff like that. And he even messes up a lot too. He ends up in a lot of trouble, which is very, very cool. Adds to the tension of the book. But I just felt like he sort of like, that was like, he got like an easy pass for, that sort of storyline. So I haven't read a lot of, my final thoughts, I haven't read a lot of Westerns, so I'm definitely not an expert. I read 2 Louis L'Amours, and this is my third. And I really like the grittiness of this one. I think the violence in it happens fast, and it's like the tension builds and then violence happens quick. The descriptions of the guns was really cool. Like the way they talk about like the smoke, and like they're shooting black powder cartridges in small confined areas, so like the way the smoke blinds them and the way the fire flies out of the front, and they're talking about how it lances out of the revolvers, and just certain elements like that were really, really cool and really descriptive, and it made you feel really there in the battles. You never felt like lost of like, oh, what happened. The book mainly follows Dan, like Dan's perspective, but does change character narration from time to time, which I liked. One narrative switch shows the anxiety of Jack, which was really cool. Like there's a breakfast scene, and he's pretty much like a card player would think, like at a table, but he's watching his crew get ready for the day, and they're snowed in, and it's like somebody like calculating like what hand you have, but pretty much the hand is, if guns get pulled, who's on my side, who's going to be like got my back, or who's going to be pointing iron at me, which I thought was really cool. There's a couple other shifts that I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed this book. I was surprised as just it was legitimately a blind buy. This was I think if you're looking for a gritty Western, something that's pulpy, something that feels very of the time, this is definitely a really good book. There's actually a movie. I want to watch it, and they do something really cool, because I read the synopsis of the movie. It's not 9 Outlaws. I think it's like 6, which is fine. I mean, 9 is fine, but there's mainly 6 that you really know about in the book, and really get to know, and really get to feel them out as characters. I'm just kind of rambling, so hit me up in the comments. Let me know if you read this book, if you read anything else from Mr. Lee Wells, or anything else from Starkhouse that might be a really good recommendation. I try to read one Western a year, It's usually in the winter, which is funny because that's when this one takes place. But yeah, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, do all the fun things. And I'll catch you in another video.